A bright afternoon sun bathed the luxurious shopping district in a golden glow, the kind of warmth that seemed to bring out the best, or the worst, in people. The streets were alive with the hum of conversations, the soft clicking of designer heels on polished stone, and the occasional honk from a frustrated driver stuck in traffic. It was the kind of day that made the city feel like a dream, a place where ambition met indulgence at every turn. Among the bustle, a boy no older than 13 stood at the corner of an upscale boutique. His dark skin glistened slightly in the heat, and his wide, curious eyes darted between the stores and the shoppers, as if soaking in a world he rarely had the chance to see. He wore a plain white t-shirt and a pair of slightly scuffed sneakers, but his posture carried an unmistakable air of quiet confidence. Inside the boutique, Eleanor Carlyle was the picture of privilege. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, cascading over her shoulders like a golden waterfall. Dressed in a chic, tailored suit that screamed wealth, she was surrounded by store clerks eager to cater to her every whim. Eleanor's sharp blue eyes scanned the display of handbags, each more exorbitantly priced than the last. To her, this was just another day of asserting her status. As Eleanor stepped out of the boutique, a sudden commotion near the curb caught her attention. The boy had accidentally bumped into her, his small frame colliding lightly with her arm. She turned sharply, her eyes narrowing into icy slits. "Watch where you're going," she snapped, her voice cold enough to make the air around her seem a little sharper. The boy flinched, mumbling an apology, but before he could step away, Eleanor reached out and grabbed his wrist. "Do you have any idea how much this suit costs? Or are you too busy loitering to understand?" she hissed, her grip tightening. The boy looked up at her, his face a mix of fear and defiance. His lips quivered, but his eyes locked onto hers with a determination that belied his age. "I said I'm sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean to bump into you." The exchange had started drawing the attention of passers-by. Eleanor felt their eyes on her, a mix of curiosity and judgment. That only fueled her irritation. Without thinking, she raised her hand and delivered a sharp slap to the boy's cheek. The sound of the slap echoed louder than she expected, cutting through the lively chatter of the street. A collective gasp rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. The boy stumbled slightly but didn't fall. Instead, he straightened up, one hand on his cheek, and looked directly at Eleanor. "You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly, his voice trembling but firm. Eleanor scoffed, brushing imaginary dust off her sleeve. "Oh, really? And who's going to stop me? You." The boy's eyes hardened, and he took a step closer. Then, with a voice that carried far more power than his size suggested, he said, "My dad will, because he's your boss." The color drained from Eleanor's face in an instant. The confident, entitled woman who had commanded the street just moments ago now stood frozen, her hand still raised slightly as if she couldn't quite comprehend what had just happened. Around them, the crowd murmured, their curiosity turning into astonishment. The boy didn't wait for her response. He turned on his heel and walked away, his back straight and head held high. Eleanor, rooted to the spot, felt a chill run down her spine. Suddenly, the weight of her actions seemed unbearable, and the realization of what she might have just done began to creep in. She didn't know who the boy's father was, but the way he'd said those words made her stomach twist in a way she hadn't felt in years. Eleanor stood frozen for a few moments, her fingers still tingling from the sudden slap she had delivered. The sting of the boy's words echoed in her mind, and she swallowed hard, her throat tight. "My dad is your boss." The words repeated in her head like a broken record, each time cutting deeper into her confidence. She scanned the boy's retreating form, but the crowd had already begun to disperse, their curiosity fading as quickly as it had appeared. Her thoughts were swirling. She had been so caught up in the moment, in the rush of arrogance, that she hadn't even considered who the boy was, or why he had been in her way in the first place. But that line, "My dad is your boss," had struck her like a punch to the gut. She was a woman who had spent years building her reputation, climbing the social ladder with grace and a certain level of ruthlessness. She was used to being in control, used to the quiet whispers of envy and admiration that followed her wherever she went. But now, everything felt different. She took a shaky breath and glanced around, looking for any sign that she was being watched by someone who might know her. The few onlookers seemed to have gone back to their own lives, chatting, walking, or simply enjoying the warmth of the day. But Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that her actions had somehow set off a chain of events that would not be so easy to undo. Her mind raced. Who is this boy? Who is his father? She had no real answer, but a deep, gnawing anxiety settled in her stomach. She was used to power. She was used to knowing who was who, and where everyone stood. But this situation had rattled her. The boy's words haunted her. She was accustomed to dealing with high-profile individuals, people who made millions, who ran companies, who owned businesses. Was the boy's father someone she should know? Someone in her circle? Someone with power beyond her comprehension? Or was it all just a bluff? A child's desperate attempt to save face after being humiliated? Elena shook her head, trying to clear the fog of confusion. She quickly dismissed the idea that the boy had been bluffing. There had been something in his eyes, a quiet confidence, a strength she hadn't expected in someone so young. It wasn't the typical look of a child trying to get away with something. No, this was different. This felt real. Her hand still shook slightly as she fumbled for her phone. She had to find out. She had to know who the boy's father was and whether or not he had the power to make her regret this moment. She needed to make sure she wasn't stepping into something far more dangerous than she had imagined. As she tapped the screen, scrolling through her contacts, Elena tried to focus. She could feel the weight of the moment, the uncertainty pressing in on her. She had made a mistake, and mistakes like this were never forgotten. Not by someone with influence. Not by someone who could ruin her reputation in an instant. Her thumb hovered over the name of a trusted business associate, a man who was well connected in the city's elite circles. He would know something. He always knew something. Hello. His voice was smooth, composed, a stark contrast to the turmoil in her chest. David. Elena's voice was sharp, clipped, betraying the tension she was feeling. I need you to look into something for me. A boy. About 13, dark-skinned, maybe wearing a white t-shirt, scuffed sneakers. I need to know who his father is. There was a pause on the other end of the line, a quiet hum of uncertainty. She could practically hear David's thoughts whirling as he processed the unusual request. Elena, why do you need to know that? His voice softened, but Elena could detect the caution creeping in. David was no fool. He knew better than to ask too many questions when it came to her, but even he could sense when something was off. I don't have time for questions right now, David, Elena replied, her tone firm but controlled. Just find out who he is. I don't care how you do it. The line went quiet again, and Elena could feel her pulse quicken. What are you getting yourself into, Elena? She knew the answer, of course. She was stepping into a situation she had never anticipated. A situation where she might not come out on top. All right, David's voice finally broke through her thoughts. I'll get back to you as soon as I know something. Elena hung up without another word. She didn't need to hear any more. Her mind was already racing ahead, picturing the worst-case scenario. She had been rude to the boy, yes, but the slap had been impulsive, a reflex. She had acted out of frustration, out of a momentary lapse in judgment. But if his father was indeed someone powerful, someone with the kind of influence that could topple her carefully constructed life, the consequences could be more than just public embarrassment. She tried to shake the thought. No, she told herself, that's not going to happen. It's just a child's empty threat. But even as she tried to convince herself, she couldn't ignore the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. There was something about the boy, something about the way he had spoken, that made her doubt the simplicity of her own assumptions. Minutes passed. Then an hour. She wandered the streets aimlessly, her mind caught in a whirlwind of possibilities. She couldn't focus. She couldn't think straight. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart skipped a beat, expecting it to be David with the information she so desperately needed. But the minutes dragged on, and no call came. And then, just as she was about to give up on the idea of getting any answers that day, her phone rang. She didn't need to look at the screen to know it was David. The timing was too perfect. She answered immediately, the anticipation almost unbearable. Elena David's voice was grave now, no longer calm and easy. I found him. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Who is he? She whispered, barely able to speak. David paused. She could hear the hesitation in his voice, the way he was choosing his words carefully. This isn't just some random kid, Elena. He's the son of someone very important. Her heart skipped a beat. Elena's mind raced as the words hung heavy in the air. Very important. The phrase echoed in her ears, its weight pressing down on her chest. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't think. The boy's words, "My dad is your boss," now seemed more ominous than ever, and she felt a creeping dread crawl up her spine. Who? She finally managed to croak, her voice barely a whisper. David hesitated again, and that hesitation only made Elena more anxious. She could practically hear the gears turning in his mind, deciding how much to reveal, how much to hold back. His father, David began slowly, is Samuel Blackwell. Elena's stomach churned. The name hit her like a sucker punch to the gut. She had heard of Samuel Blackwell before, of course. Who hadn't? He was one of the most powerful men in the city, a self-made billionaire who had come from nothing and built an empire that spanned industries, from technology to finance to real estate and entertainment. His name was synonymous with ambition and ruthlessness, a man whose word carried the weight of 1,000 others. But what truly made Samuel Blackwell dangerous was his reputation. He wasn't just wealthy. He was known for quietly controlling people, for pulling strings from the shadows. No one crossed him, and those who did found their careers, their lives, their reputations shattered. He wasn't a man you wanted to make an enemy of. And yet, here she was, having slapped his son in the middle of a crowded street. Elena's grip on her phone tightened, her knuckles going white. Where is he now? The boy. The one eye. Her words faltered as the reality of the situation sunk in. Where is he? David's voice dropped even lower, as if he was afraid someone might overhear him. He's been picked up by his father's security team. I just confirmed it. They were watching the whole time, Elena. Her heart skipped a beat. Security team. The boy wasn't just a random child. He had been protected, watched over by people who were paid to ensure his safety, his well-being. The realization made Elena's blood run cold. She had just slapped the son of one of the most powerful men in the city, and she hadn't even known it. What does Blackwell want with me? She asked, her voice barely more than a whisper, as if speaking too loudly would make the situation even worse. I don't think it's what he wants, David replied, his tone ominously calm. It's more about what you've done, and Elena, you're not going to like what happens next. The words felt like a punch, and Elena's breath caught in her chest. She could almost feel the walls closing in on her, the weight of her actions slowly crushing her. She had always been in control, always known how to navigate the intricate web of power and influence in the city. But now she was nothing but a pawn in a game she didn't understand. David cleared his throat, as if trying to push through the tension. Look, Elena, I've done what I can to find out what's going on. But I think you need to be prepared. Blackwell doesn't forgive easily, and he doesn't forget. If he chooses to make an example out of you, it could ruin everything. Your career, your reputation, your entire life. Elena swallowed hard, trying to steady her breathing. She felt the familiar panic rising in her chest, the kind of panic that always came when she realized she wasn't in control. She had made too many enemies in her rise to the top, but none of them had ever held the kind of power that Samuel Blackwell did. She had heard the rumors, of course, whispers of deals made in dark corners, of lives destroyed in the blink of an eye, of people who had crossed him and paid the price. She had never thought it would happen to her. She had never thought she would be the one at the mercy of someone else's wrath. What should I do? She asked, her voice barely audible. David's response was slow, deliberate. You need to figure out how to make this right, and you need to do it fast. You've already crossed the line, Elena. Now it's about damage control. You need to get in front of this before Blackwell takes matters into his own hands. Elena's mind spun. Damage control. She could already feel the weight of the media attention that was sure to follow. The story would spread like wildfire. Rich woman slaps boy in the street, chaos ensues. It was the kind of headline that could destroy her. The kind of scandal that had ruined people before, people who were far more powerful than she was. I can't fix this on my own, can I? Elena's voice trembled as she spoke. There was no pride left in her words, no arrogance, no cold confidence. She was naked in her vulnerability now, exposed in a way she never thought possible. David's silence on the other end of the line made her feel even smaller. He didn't need to answer. She knew the truth. I'll try and make some calls, he finally said. But I'm telling you, Elena, you need to take this seriously. Blackwell doesn't play around. He's not someone you want to owe anything to, and he's not someone you want to anger. Elena's grip on the phone tightened again, her nails digging into her palm. She felt helpless, uncertain. For the first time in a long time, she didn't know how to fix things, and she knew that her usual tricks, the manipulation, the charm, the carefully crafted image, wouldn't work this time. This was something different, something bigger than her. As she hung up the phone, the weight of the situation settled in, and she felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She needed to act fast. She needed to figure out who Samuel Blackwell was, what he wanted, and how she could possibly make amends before it was too late. But no matter how much she tried to plan ahead, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was already too deep in. Her mind drifted back to the boy, the one she had slapped. He had been so calm, so sure of himself in that moment. It was almost as if he knew exactly what would happen next. Was this all part of a larger plan? Had the boy's father orchestrated this encounter, waiting for her to make the wrong move? Or had it been a simple accident, a mistake that could be forgiven if she played her cards right? The tension in her chest only grew with every passing minute. She could feel the storm brewing, and somewhere in the back of her mind a chilling thought began to surface. What if Samuel Blackwell wanted more than just an apology? What if he wanted something she couldn't give? The only thing Elena knew for certain was that she was standing at the precipice, and there was no turning back now.